Hey guys! Welcome back to Everyday Jesus. We are absolutely delighted today. It's a fresh new week, and guys, we continue on, this journey, and
it continues, man.
It continues. We're still
the road is long ahead, guys.
We're still here. There's many times we have reflected ourselves. It's so easy to come together and with the initial excitement of starting a YouTube channel, it's so easy to just establish everything. But once you get it going, most people don't get past maybe 3-4 videos. It gets tedious and you lose purpose. Mm-hmm. But we thank you guys so much with whoever is taking the time. I say this all the time. Whoever is taking their time to keep up with us and whatever the message is.
It means a lot, guys.
It does mean
you guys, the amendments and just the amount of support you guys are showing, it definitely means a lot, and
it does.
It's a big motivation, like Axel said.
Even in our personal lives, I find myself now, whether I'm at work or even during church service here at our hometown church, I'm hearing our messages differently. I'm picking up on things, and I was like, I gotta share that with Everyday Jesus family. And so, but no, we absolutely thank you guys for the immense time that you guys are sharing with us virtually. And so let's get on with this. Let's get
guys,
rolling.
Let's get started, man. Let's dive into it. Let's
brother, this is what episode?
This is episode 3, guys.
This is episode 3.
Episode 3. We can't believe it. It was like yesterday we did our intro video, but guys, episode 3,
part 2. So if you guys will have noticed, just this previous episode 2, which is the our lonely ? Episode, we have introduced, obviously, that it's going to be by parts, right? We wanted to do it this way because today we're going to be sharing a biblical story, right? We're going to be sharing one of our biblical characters' testimony on how it correlates and connects to our just previous episode, right? On how we speak, on how people can feel lonesome, lonely, maybe dealing with emotional stress, distress, depression, whatever the cause may be. Today, we introduce backed up biblical, of someone ordinary that went through the same thing, serving God. That's the key point. I need you guys to realize that many times we who want to serve God full-heartedly, it's not going to be sunshines and flowers and roses all the time. Guys, you absolutely have to be prepared that if you full-heartedly want to follow Christ, the Christian life isn't easy.
You got to be aware that
there's
going to be difficulties in life.
And we don't want that to be a deterrent for anyone that's wanting to, begin a walk with Christ, a walk with God. Don't let that be your deterrent. Let that be your motivation. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, those who push back against so much pressure build up stronger. And so
I like that, man. Let that be your motivation, guys. Let that be your motivation. Don't let that, put you down or take you down.
Absolutely.
Grab that, and like Axel said, the word of the day, guys, word of the week, let that be your motivation. So with that, guys, Axel, thank you very much for introducing that with us. Guys, last week we started part 1, so if you haven't seen it yet, pause the video. We'll be here. We won't go away, guys. It's fine. You can let us be for a couple of minutes. Watch part 1. But now, guys, we're going to dive into part 2. And as you've already seen on the description, the title of today, part 2, last week we added, a little question mark and everything. But today, guys, we put exclamation marks because, this is something that brings, a lot of power behind it when we say it. So What is it, Axel? What is the title for today?
I have had enough.
You've had enough of what,
I've had enough. That's our title.
Oh, my bad, man.
Look,
guys.
That's the title for this episode. This episode is I Have Had Enough. So it kind of just correlates and connects.
I thought you were quitting on me. You said I've had enough.
No,
You're about to walk out of our studio, man.
We continue on. This is the title for this episode. Today's episode is I have had enough.
So exclamation
mark. Last episode was a question mark, so today's episode is an exclamation mark. You guys, with that being said, we won't even waste no more time. We're gonna dive straight in. Today's episode is fully immersed in the Bible. So I need you guys to understand one thing. What I'm gonna do for you guys right now is we're gonna share a lot of time together right quick, right? What I'm going to do is I want to even go ahead and introduce who we're talking about. We're going to be talking about my boy Elijah.
Elijah.
We're going to be talking about Elijah and what he went through. But in order for Edwin to take over and fully, Edwin's going to be beautifully detailing the point that is the center of this video. I first have to get you guys caught up to speed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce where we're at in the Bible, and then I'm just going to summarize the story leading up to the event. There's a cause and effect kind of thing, and I think we already discussed this in one of our first episodes. There always is a cause and effect, even in our Christian life. So, guys, go ahead, join me. We're going to be in the book of First of Kings, and it's going to be wide right here. We first are going to be, when you get a chance, pause the video, or even in your own time, go ahead, read the entire chapter and read. It's a story. It's a narration. You first have to understand and just visualize what Elijah must have gone through to understand the connection that we want you guys to understand. So we're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 18, which I will summarize now for you guys. And then when we get to chapter 19, Edwin will lead and take over. So you guys, allow me to just break it down. This is what I have here on my end. I have 1 Kings chapter 18. The title says here, The Countess on Mount Carmel. So guys, we're introduced with the character who is Elijah. He's the main character. He is the main character of this episode. And you see, at the time that Elijah is living in, right, it says here, we are in the 3rd year of the drought, right? And at this time that Elijah is living in, he is living in among the king that reigns that predominant area of Israel. Correct me if I'm ever wrong, by the way. Just jump in. The king of Israel at that time is, you will see when you begin to read chapter 18, is Ahab. And so, apologies for the pronunciation.
If we mispronounce anything, guys.
These Mid-Eastern or Midwestern, have always been really unique.
They were creative with their names back in the days, guys. Nowadays, we keep it simple. Axel, Yeah. Not throwing any shade on
So, the king of Israel is Ahab. That's another character I want to go ahead and introduce. With the king of Israel at the time of Ahab, I want to go ahead and even introduce his wife. You see, most of us have to realize that with a lot of these stories, just as powerful as the king was,
queen had a lot of saying to it.
The queen had a lot of saying, or what we know now in our times as the wife of of the husband. The king and obviously the queen. The queen at this time is Jezebel or Jezebel. And I'm sure you guys, anyone else that has gone to church or whatever church you guys are visiting our videos from, whatever background you might have or denomination, I'm sure we have heard Jezebel before being mentioned. So we have Elijah, we have King Ahab, we have his queen Jezebel. And so at this time we know that while Ahab is king, their people have lost focus of God completely, entirely. Their people in Israel have taken the sanctuaries where they would come to worship God, our God, right?
The holy places.
The holy place, right? And have completely turned to start idolizing. This is where we have the word idol, right? To idolize, to worship something other than our one and only God. They start idolizing these other gods. And this is when we get introduced to the God, and excuse me here a moment, help me find it right quick, to the God,
Baal.
Baal. Let me see.
B-A-A-L.
B-A-A-L. Baal. So they start idolizing this foreign god, someone other than, the one and only.
The one and only.
The one and only God. And what's so interesting is to go ahead and start summarizing this all up. I need you guys to understand that at one point, Elijah, who is a commoner, just like me and you, out of his faith in God, right? Even though we can't see God, even though we can't feel God, out of his faith, right? He goes on to challenging the kings and their prophets, right? And their false god, Baal, and a challenge. You see, people took their challenges really serious, and they said, you know what, Elijah, we're going to be counting your life with this challenge. In other words, we're going to take your challenge. We're going to use our God Baal, and we will challenge your God, one and only mighty, right?
We're going to see who the true God is.
We're going to see who the true God is. And what they ended up doing is they ended up planting these sanctions, right? Or these almost like a statue,
Holocaust
kind of like a thing of worship or idolizing. And so to sum it up, it says here that for a while, these people, these prophets spent time idolizing and worshiping Baal, saying, oh, God Baal, make your presence known. You guys, to sum this all up, the confirmation for both was that Baal send fire and send this whole temple or their whole statue, consume the temple that they have, the altar that they had made,
the altar and the bull that was on top of
absolutely, as confirmation that Baal was real and was listening to the prophets, the people that were worshiping Baal. But we know now that this was a false prophet. False prophets and the enemy does not have that kind of power, but our Almighty God does. And so Elijah just set up his own altar. He had the bull, and he made this prayer to our God. And sure enough, with an immediate instance after his prayer was done, there was just this, almost like a lightning, just a flash of fire, just completely engulfed this altar. And so that was our confirmation, and the people believed in that. But now here's where it gets interesting. Even though Elijah confirmed that our God was the one and only powerful God, because obviously the altar was consumed in fire, engulfed in fire. I mean, can you imagine seeing something now, cast fire, a ball of fire from
heaven?
It would be
something astonishing.
Something astonishing for our nowadays to believe in. So I'm gonna now forward it to Edwin. He's now gonna introduce us where our main focus for this video falls after the happening of Elijah, realizing to the people that, hey, God, our God is real.
Alrighty, guys. So jumping right behind where Axel left off. So after God confirmed, not only to Elijah but to because the whole entire nation of Israel was present there, to seeing who was the real God. After God confirmed it and God made His presence be felt and seen, the whole nation of Israel said, they recognized that they had strayed away, and they said, God is the real God. And Elijah sent for the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Jezebel to be killed. So here's where the story starts to get interesting and
juicy.
And this is kind of like a movie that we're picturing in our heads. So we're reaching the climax. So Jezebel in chapter 19, guys, like Axel said, there's so much in this story. We wish we could fully go into detail, but guys, take a moment and just read chapter 18, chapter 19, and even before that. There's a backstory behind that. But now we're jumping into chapter 19, and the Bible tells us that it came to the ears of Jezebel that her prophets had been killed. So, she was enraged. She was furious. She was mad. She said, who is Elijah, thinking he can kill my servants, thinking he can kill my prophets? So, she says, and she sends a message to Elijah. She says, Elijah, let the gods punish me if by tomorrow you're not dead. And wow, I mean, a death threat.
What a death threat.
And it wasn't from, just a common person, no. Just somebody in the street that says, hey, by tomorrow you're going to die. This was
the queen herself.
The death threat that came from the queen, the second most powerful person in the whole entire kingdom after the king.
Yeah.
She was threatening Elijah with his life. So guys, the story goes on and it says, Elijah, it came to his ears that the queen was after him. And he ran away. He fled.
He was scared.
He fled for his life.
Yeah.
And it got to a point, and this is where we want, you guys to
where
analyze.
Our main focus is at.
Where our main focus is at. And, Axel kind of touched this in the beginning. The walk with Christ isn't a walk, filled with roses and petals and flowers and, sunshines and everything. I mean, we wish it would be like that, but it's not.
No.
We may ask ourselves, why was Elijah being persecuted? Because he showed the nation of Israel who the true God was.
True God was, yeah.
Did Elijah do anything wrong? No, he didn't. He was following God's will. He was doing, what God had called him to do. But in that process of him, doing God's work, in that process of him, showing people the true God, that's when his life starts getting, treacherous and all the problems start surrounding him. And that might be happening in your life, or it might happen, symbolically in our life. Many times, we have our focus on God, we're doing God's will. But have you ever noticed that many times when we want to focus more on God, that's when more problems start to come into our life. Before, when we didn't read our Bible, exactly. When we didn't do our devotional, when we didn't do our prayer, life went way much easier.
It was easy.
But now that you're trying to get closer to God,
a genuine connection too.
Now that you're trying to have a genuine connection with God, now you start to see so many things around your life, so many problems, sickness, affliction that may come into your life. And that might be the point where you start getting depressed. That might be the point where you may start getting down and you might start hitting rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you guys, Elijah hit that point. And
he hit rock bottom.
We were talking about that last week, guys. When you feel alone, when you're surrounded by all your troubles, by all your problems,
you kind of drown in your own thoughts.
You get drowned, and you get stuck in a state that nowadays we call depression.
Yeah.
And it got so bad to Elijah that I want you guys to follow along with me. Chapter 19, verse 4. Elijah, it says, he had ran away, he had fled, and he came to Beersheba in Judah. And it says he left his servant there. And verse 4 says, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, he came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. Guys, it got to a point, all the affliction, all the problems he was having, that he prayed, he asked God, take my life. He asked God, I want to die. And the verse continues and says, I have had what?
Enough.
I have had enough. Elijah was ready, and he told God, he said, God, I've had enough. This is it. Take my life away.
Mm-hmm.
And guys, sadly, Axel, there's a point, in the human life when all the problems and all the affliction, start surrounding us, that sadly,
it becomes overbearing.
As human beings, we might say those words, and we might say, God, I've had enough. What's the point? What's the point of continuing, in your road, following you, if all these problems are around me, if all these problems are afflicting me?
Yeah.
And guys, like we said last week, this is something not to be taken very lightly. Actually, there's people out there in the world every day that suffer depression, that suffer suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing here with Elijah. He had suicidal thoughts. He said, God, just take my life away. He said, I don't want to keep on living. But guys, the most wonderful and the most important thing, in this story and just throughout the whole entire Bible, is that God doesn't leave you alone. It's that God wants to strengthen you. He wants you to rise up, and he wants you to continue. Because let me tell you, and follow along with me, guys. What did God tell Elijah? What did God do? What did God do for Elijah? Elijah said, I've had enough. This is it. This no more for me. But take a look, Axel. We're going to read verse 5. It says, then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. All at once, an angel touched him and said, get up and eat. He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. Verse 7, the angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. So he got up, ate and drank, strengthened by the food. He traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Oreb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. The angel of God came to Elijah, visited him,
and even provided food to sustain him.
He said, get up and eat. You know, what was the purpose behind the food? You just said it, Axel, to strengthen him.
Yeah.
Who provided that?
God himself.
God provided
through
that.
Through the messenger who was an angel.
Through the messenger. Guys, who's going to provide you the strength for you in those deep and troubled times? God is going to provide.
No one else but God himself.
God is our provider.
Yeah.
God told Elijah, get up and eat, for your journey awaits for you ahead.
Absolutely. In other words, he had completely surpassed his desire to end his life right then and there.
Exactly.
He said, hey,
he said, cut it out. You
got to get yourself back on this road.
Get it together.
Your journey isn't over right here. It continues on.
Exactly. And guys, that is what God is telling you and God is telling me. So it doesn't matter, what situation and at what point of your life you may find yourself. And it may be possible you may say those words. Axel, I may say those words in one point in my life. So many things comes in our life and we may say, this is enough. I've had it. But God tells us, I am your provider. I'm going to give you the strength. Don't give up, because you still have a journey ahead of you. God has plans for you. God has plans for me. God has plans for Axel, for every single one of us. Yeah. But God wants to tell you, don't give up. God provided the food to give him strength. It's okay for you to take a moment and, just find yourself, because as human beings, we lose ourselves in society, in social media, in just so many things. We end up losing ourselves. But, guys, if necessary, take a moment.
Yeah.
Distance yourself away from everything. Find yourself, find your purpose, find your connection with God. Strengthen yourself and listen to God's word when he says, your journey is still ahead of you.
And most importantly, I was just going to pitch in there with him. In that moment that you do decide to take time for yourself, you're not just taking time for yourself, but I hope and my wish is that within that time that you isolate yourself from everyone, if you need to, that you find time to have genuine connection or relationship with God. It is a time to build that relationship with God if you haven't already. When we're reading the Bible, that's how God speaks to us. But how we speak back to him is through our prayers. And I think both of those mutually go interconnected. So guys, when we read our Bibles, that's how God is speaking to us. But know that we must have connection with him through our prayers. So prayer is key goal in your spiritual life as well.
Thank you, man. And guys, we've reached the end of our episode. And we hope that this story of Elijah has been a blessing to you. And it may be, a lesson that brings a big message to your life. We want you to know that even in the point of our life when we say, I have had enough. I've had enough. I want to give up. God is your strength. Find the strength in God. And God tells you don't give up, because your journey lies ahead of you. Your journey is still ahead of you, guys. So guys, you have so much to give to God. You have so much potential. Guys, let's keep on moving forward. And let's have our eyes, fixed, locked on the cross, which is Jesus Christ. So guys, thank you so much for joining us once again for episode 3. This was part 2, guys, and we hope it's been a big blessing to you guys. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week.
And we'll see you on the next episode. Guys,
God bless.
God bless.